The North Node will be a couple of months in the 5th degree of Taurus. And this directs our spiritual program, our spiritual life, very clearly into a particularity of consciousness. This widow at the open grave image is quite impactful. The idea of death and grief and facing a totally different life from what you've been used to is implied in this image. So this is a time for a profound reorientation on the spiritual level. Taurus 5, widow at an open grave, cutting ties with the past. As much as we must exhale at the end of every breath, it is inevitable that we must lose our wealth and influence. The grasping that occurs as we cope with materiality is a major obstacle to soul evolution. And if we are to optimize our progression, we must learn to let go of everything in the very moment of its completion. For a true seeker, grief is a debilitating emotion that must not be overindulged. So too is nostalgia. Letting go of grief. It's hard to imagine anything more difficult. And yet this is the level that we're aspiring to reach in our spiritual realization. The death and the grief and the needing to come to terms with a totally new agenda for your life, these are not unlikely. These are not unusual. These are pretty much certainties. At one point in your life, you're going to have to deal with loss so poignant that it clouds all else and it dominates a period of your life. I think this is natural. It's probably healthy as well. The question is whether or not that process takes you a matter of days, weeks, months, years, or indeed, some people never let go. And of course, if you never let go, then it can't be right, can it? That's living in the past. And if you give up years of your life to grief, it does seem unreasonable. And yet, healthy grief changes who we are and enables us to look to the future differently. So much is invested in relationship that if we lose a partner, it feels like we've lost a limb. The same with a family member very often. If you lose your parents when you're very, very young, or even if you're still a relatively young adult, it's still terrible. And yet if you lose a parent when it is an appropriate time, they're maybe in their 80s and you're 60 by then or something, 50, you've come to terms with the inevitability that which is currently alive now will only be so for a limited period. It's certain. And many people don't understand that certain things in life which are unpopular and painful, this is the most extreme of them, but the general principle is hinted at here. Whatever you've got now is just for now. Even a moment later is not the same. And some things have to be accepted to be ephemeral, which you would rather they were permanent. But there is no such thing as permanence. It doesn't exist. What exists is a certainty of duration for some things. The sun will probably go on shining for a good few more years yet. But that can't be assumed for relationship. It can't be assumed for anything worldly at all. And so a part of our spiritual evolution has to do with knowing how to cope with the ephemeral nature of life. What you've got now, you've got now. Enjoy it now, fine. But it won't be there later. That's a real deep lesson to learn. Now what Jones says on this one. A widow at an open grave. This is a symbol of the impermanence of physical things. Whenever man permits reality to come to center, in the static representation, and thus neglects the creative contribution through which he has responsibility for the larger whole. Implicit in the reverse symbolism is the need for an inner and constant return to every enduring value achieved by the self, and for a complete and immediate release from all outworn elements of experience. I'm reminded of the Tibetan Buddhists who do an incredible artwork using chalk and colours, and they create a mandala. It takes them thousands of man hours, as it were, and then they just blow it away. At the end of their task, they just blow it away, they destroy it, teaching them to live with impermanence. And here we have an example of where tremendous concentration and effort and purity goes into something for its own sake of process. And suggested also that this is a highly developed mastery of spiritual principles. Now, if we actually try to bring that into our lives and understand that this moment itself is real, but nothing else is, no future, no past, they're not real. They're constructs of our imagination. They're imaginary. And if we live like that, just knowing that the here and now is real and nothing else is, then we've reached the level of mastery. This is what Zen Buddhists learned. That moment by moment, what is real is this, nothing else matters at all. It doesn't have any material relevance. And we live so differently from that. We live needing permanence for us to actually retain mental health. In many cases, people just could not cope if they had to give up what they depend upon. So this is a warning around not getting too caught up in that which is impermanent, and everything is impermanent. Now, of course, the South Node is in Scorpio 5, and we have the image here of a massive rocky shore. And that gives you the sense of permanence, doesn't it? We're looking at impermanence and permanence. However, the massive rocky shore is not really permanent. It's just stronger, and it has longer duration. And this applies to some of the constructs that we have in social life. We build institutions. So this is the stabilizing influence of institutions. Though slow to form, as is land itself, the ways of a community become firmly entrenched and together create a bastion against the storms and tides of evolutionary change. Society is by nature conservative, since stability is reassuring and promotes investment and commitment to the collective well-being of the group. The South Node is what we find easy. It's our default condition. It's our resources and our skills and our abilities without any great expenditure of effort or anxiety. And here we have the resting of our South Node in the stability of our institutions. Very often institutions come up for a lot of scapegoating. We blame the government and we blame the banks and we blame all manner of institutions. Actually, if they behaved a little bit more in their integrity, we wouldn't blame them quite so much. However, the point is that instead of blaming these institutions, we should actually be praising them. Because however imperfect they are, without institutions we're lost. Absolutely lost and alone in a frightening world. The institution of community itself, the expectation that if you say good morning to somebody, they will respond by saying good morning back. That's profoundly securing on the level of community. And we have to give some attention to that. And perhaps if you're enjoying the support of your community, it might be appropriate to give something back to bind you into the community even more deeply. So this is what gives us the foundation, the structure, the stability, the security and reassurance upon which we face the world of impermanence, even to the point of being able to cope with grief. So it's the relationship between those two things that we're focused on for a couple of months, actually, until May.